Alright, I need to be upfront about this one. This was a hard subject. I had to come back to it quite a bit, and I've approached it with a very specific group of people in mind. Men. Particularly those who are isolated, lonely, angry, or all of the above. I danced around this topic for a long time, trying to make it palatable to everyone, but I'm granting myself this one. If you're not a man, you are more than welcome to watch this, but you might find yourself a little bit uncomfortable with some of the subject matter and how I've chosen to talk about things. And that's because it's not really for you. Proceed with that in mind. A short time ago, I made a video unpacking my struggles with toxic masculinity. What that looked like for me, how it felt, and how I broke away from it. But since then, I have come to question the term itself for a number of reasons. The more I got thinking about it, the more the term unraveled for me. Not to the point of exposing its weakness as a construct, but to the point of understanding its appeal with an awareness that I didn't previously have. I was ignoring the security of it all. I was ignoring the fact that for all its faults, it is something tangible. Like, I have lost track of the number of conversations that I have had with people that are just me trying to explain to them that toxic masculinity is not diminishing or dismissing masculinity as a whole. But if trying to communicate a certain point consistently devolves into an argument of semantics and misunderstandings, at a certain point you gotta cut your losses and come up with better terms. I was at my own ass, returning to this point over and over again, so it was more about me being heard and understood rather than my own understanding of what this other person was grappling with. And it wasn't just a disagreement about terminology. I've been pulling the rug out from under people and then being shocked when they were unsteady and upset about it. I was doing that thing where I criticize something and declare it disposable without first acknowledging why it might be hard to let go of. When I made that video, the majority response was overwhelmingly positive, and I don't want to minimize that, but my own opportunity for growth came in the form of paying attention to the criticism, which was mostly frustration over the fact that I had been encouraging other men to embrace their femininity like that's some kind of stand-in for masculinity, when it's not. I mean, the whole point is that we need balance. Now, in full fairness to myself, I was describing my own experiences and how I found freedom and security, but I was also putting it out there as a reference for other guys, some of whom saw themselves in it, some of whom did not. And I get why some guys felt like it missed the mark. And I really appreciate the ones who talked about their own struggles to that effect. Because as much as masculinity and femininity describe traits that we all possess, it doesn't really get to the root of the problem to just tell guys to get more in touch with their feminine side. And this is absolutely something that I'm guilty of. Criticizing a problem without also providing an adequate, concrete solution for it. Now, oftentimes this is warranted criticism, but speaking for myself here, I wasn't asking enough if that criticism was helpful. As my friend and fellow content creator Aronok put it, if you get rid of your bed because it is too firm and do not replace it, you will be left with sleeping on the floor. Now, I'm not pinning this on anybody else. I'm responsible for myself. I did this. I encouraged men to start dismantling the shoddy structure of masculinity and just go sauntering out into the elements hoping for the best like that is some kind of adequate solution. Which is admittedly kind of like handing someone a parachute they don't know how to operate seconds before you punt them off a cliff, like there you go bud, figure it out. Just, go from having a tangible concept to trying to invent one on the fly without the tools to do so. What's the big deal? I don't think that I have been describing healthy masculinity with enough structure to stand up to its predecessor. And I'm not going to pretend that there aren't people out there doing that work to build up that archetype already. I'm just acknowledging the shots that I missed in that effort. Because one of the major problems here is that men aren't heard when they try to communicate their needs. And a lot of them have been trying, but are limited by the fact that they've only been taught to communicate using aggression. A lot of them are trapped. Pro-social behavior is what earns you an invitation to the party, but if you never learn pro-social behavior, you're kind of left on the outside looking in, getting increasingly frustrated with the fact that you're excluded. And it adds insult to injury every time someone takes a moment to peek through the window and ask, what about those guys, just to be told that, those guys sealed their own fate, they deserve their exclusion. Like, in leftist spaces, won't somebody think of the men is itself a joke. A mockery of male feelings, because many of us operate with this idea that men have it too easy to be justified in any pain that they experience on the grounds of being men. And it's fucked up, because it's opening the doors just long enough to say, haha, you don't understand why we don't want you at the party, and then closing them again. We know humans need connection to thrive. We know communal support helps people. We know boys and men often aren't given the same opportunities to develop these emotional skills that let them access all of this stuff in the first place. And we've still normalized laughing at this vicious cycle that they live in and blaming them for their own suffering. Like they just weren't trying hard enough with the completely outdated toolkit that they were given. Like it's their own fault if they're struggling to try and understand human connection in a world where male babies are left to cry for longer, where little boys are told to repress their feelings, where teenage boys are reduced to their impulses. Men are set up for interpersonal failure from day one, and then they're blamed for it. Arguably a downside of the very agency assigned to them that gives them so many social privileges. A lot of us go back to trying to explain that these problems stem from patriarchy, that these constructs hurting boys are themselves what is being talked about when people mention toxic masculinity. But when it's all someone has ever known, it makes sense that this message would hit you as men bad, masculinity bad, you're bad. Because it's coming after the only identity you have and then belittling you for not having a healthy backup at the ready. Like, don't you think people would be using that one already if they had it? And pointing this out, trying to talk about this, taking a moment to sincerely ask, what about men, is dangerous territory. Just talking about this topic, I am doing so amidst the looming anxiety that people are going to come after me for it, because this whole subject by its very nature is a freaking fire hazard. Because by addressing the reality of the situation, you run the risk of those affected thinking that you are making excuses. For women, it can come across as siding against them and belittling the very, very real dangers that they live with, as being an apologist for the men who are hurting them in staggering numbers. Meanwhile, for the men experiencing this isolation, it can read as approval or even encouragement of their anger and how they're expressing it. What got me onto this in the first place was a Psychology Today article by Dr. Greg Matos, The Rise of Lonely Single Men, specifically the response to it on both sides. I have linked the article in the description if you would like to go read it for yourself and follow the sources to learn more. But the responses were very telling, as was the fact that this image in particular got shared around a lot. Many of the remarks from women were mired in derision for honestly very good, very understandable reasons, but what I want to focus on today is just asking men, how did that make you feel? And it made a whole lot of you mad, didn't it? Or at least frustrated by the fact that so many women were responding like, this is obviously the problem and here is what is obviously the solution, like it's that easy. Like it's that simple to just undo all of the trauma and training that you have experienced in your life and just, be better. Like it's as simple as just going to therapy when it's increasingly challenging to find therapists who are actively taking patients, and that's assuming that you can even afford it in the first place because that shit's expensive if you don't have benefits. Like it's as simple as just recognizing the areas that you need work, despite never having learned to identify them, let alone hone those skills. So a lot of you got mad. And I get it. A lot of you wrote to Dr. Greg and got angry at him for not holding women accountable for their side of the story. For not putting responsibility on the people who have the privileges of emotional support and connection that let them do this kind of thing in the first place. After all, women dominate the interpersonal workforce. So how dare anyone not acknowledge the emotional resources gap and the uphill battle that men face? And I want to ask those of you who did this, did it help? Did you feel better? Did you find contentment and peace in the wake of this? Or did you find vindication? Because, that's the next best thing. At least it's something that you're allowed to feel, and it means that you won. What I am about to ask, I ask with the utmost sincerity. Do you see something worth addressing in the fact that straight women being selective in favor of men with good emotional intelligence and communication skills led so many men to outrage and aggressive attempts at leveling the playing field? Because if the issue is men struggling with communication, then diving further into anger and violence is just proving the point, boys. Maybe it's time to ask not what other means of communication you have, but the ones you want. What do you want? If you could wake up tomorrow and have people understand anything about you, what would it be? And what would you want to follow from that understanding? What would make you happy? How do you get there? And do you really think that what you're currently doing has you on that path? This is a huge part of the reason why the Manosphere has taken off the way it has. We want to feel good, and validation is one hell of a drug. We want to feel like our experiences are real, like our feelings matter, and this becomes especially important if you've grown up being told that they don't. But I cannot stress this enough. Validation is not justification. Acknowledging that there is a problem is not the same as excusing the harmful ways that that problem might be manifesting. You cannot punish the world into granting you happiness and satisfaction. It does not work. Isolation begets anger. Your anger makes sense. But anger begets isolation. It is not a solution. Many boys and men are in a dangerous catch-22 of being pressured to express themselves with aggression and nothing else. So it becomes easy for certain influencers to manipulate them. Validate that anger. Tell them what they're feeling is real, and anyone encouraging them to address those emotional skill deficits are vilifying them when they are, in fact, the victims. Victims laid low by feminism run amok, by women overvaluing themselves and having unrealistic expectations about what a man actually is. So we reach an impasse, trying to grasp an emotionally complex issue when you don't have the space, support, or tools to do that, when you're hurting. And I know so many of you are. The world told you that you can have anger and domination, but not much else, so you poured all of your skill points into those things thinking that if you just play the game properly, something good is bound to come your way eventually. But it hasn't yet, has it? This has not paid off for you, or you wouldn't be here still searching and still angry. You know what should piss you off is the fact that so many of these Manosphere gurus want you to stay this way. It pays their bills. They see your pain and they're capitalizing on it. Do you really truly think that these guys want you to succeed? You're their income. And where's the payoff for you? Are you financially secure? Are you seeing success in dating? Are you happy? And if you are achieving this narrow, restrictive definition of manhood given to you by some personified creatine powder on a podcast, who is that for? Like, is it for you? Or is it for somebody else? And, why do you care so much about what these guys think? And I know some of you are probably sitting here like, but I am happy and secure. And in which case, great. We love to see it. But if you're thinking that and you're mad at me or you feel compelled to mock me for wanting to talk about this and reach out, why? Like, why? If you're happy and secure, why are you angry at me for trying to reach other people who aren't? And some of you will probably say because it's funny and entertaining, and maybe that's true as well. But I'm kind of curious about that one. Does it have lasting power? Like, how do you feel afterwards? Or is, the kind of good feeling more of a just as it's happening thing? I'm just curious. And specifically for those of you asking, who's this beta soy boy acting like he fucking knows a thing about me? I'm Finn, and I am kind of a beta soy boy. I'm a pretty tender guy, and I like that about myself. You don't have to like me. You don't even have to agree with what I'm saying. All I'm encouraging you to do is think about it. Because you might have bought into this idea that you don't need all of this emotional shit, but yeah, you fucking do, bud. We all do. If you didn't need people, you wouldn't have surrounded yourself with guys who validate your belief that manhood is under attack and women are to blame. I know it's hard to accept, but this kind of thing can't be blamed on any one person or group of people. It is far too complicated for that. There are so many contributing factors. Things we do to ourselves, the way that other people treat us, the societal attitudes that we are bombarded with, and what happens when we try to break away from them. But as important as it is to acknowledge all of the complex contributions, at the end of the day, the people who are best equipped to address a problem are often those who have the most familiarity with it. Expecting women to walk into the burning building of male isolation and drag us all out ain't it. Those of us who know the layout, where to go, and how to escape need to do that work and face that danger together. It starts with us. We gotta be able to ask ourselves what our needs are and how to meet them, and then discuss that with other men. Which is all I'm trying to do here. And if you hate me for trying, then carry on. But if even some small part of you is wondering what life is like outside of the misery pit, what it's like not having to play sycophant to some self-proclaimed alpha male who doesn't give a shit about you, I am telling you, you can leave. There are people out here who care and want to help you. So if you're a boy or a man and you're watching this and you're lonely and you're mad, I see you and I'm sorry. It is bullshit that from day one you've had your feelings diminished by the people around you. That if and when you tried to connect with others, you found yourself scrutinized under standards that were never even communicated to you. That you were pressured to only express yourself with behaviors designed to intimidate others and scare them away. That you were taught that friendships are about dominance rather than mutual support. That learning healthy emotional expression has been an uphill battle for you. That somebody else made the decision on your behalf that you no longer need to be held to experience basic human contact that's essential for our well-being. That you were repeatedly fed the narrative that you were entirely driven by sex. further barring you from that platonic touch that is so essential. That when you tried to reach out and communicate what you're going through, you got mocked for it. I get it if you have felt so hopeless and alone that you have been tempted by or even pulled into these communities that don't have your best interest at heart. Because at least they acknowledge you. They welcome you, and that's something. It makes sense that you would turn to them. I'm not going to pretend to fully understand what you've been through or how that feels for you. I just want you to know that I'm trying. That I'm encouraging others to try. And I want to listen without mockery and without judgment. That I am here sincerely hoping that you can find love, connection, touch, and comfort not only for the well-being of women, but for yourself. Because you matter, my guy. You really do. And I'm sorry that you grew up in a world that ever made you believe differently. My only motivation here is welcoming you in with the hope that you will feel seen, supported, and happy. That you'll find a sense of community and brotherhood that makes you feel safe and content rather than confrontational and alone. I don't want your money, and I don't want you to assume that I have all the answers to your problems, because I don't. I don't want you to regard me with unquestioning reverence that spurs you to defend me when I'm making mistakes, especially when those mistakes are hurting people. And I think anyone who does expect that, or doesn't address it and confront it and stop it when it starts, is taking advantage of you. They are exploiting your pain and loneliness for profit and status, and that is really fucked up. You don't deserve that, and they don't deserve you. You are so much better than the stereotypes meant to weigh you down. And if masculinity is characterized by strength, let's use it to lift each other up. For those of you who have asked questions and reached out and expressed yourselves, I can't tell you what a privilege it is to be trusted with your stories. Please keep sharing them. Not just with me, but with your boys. That's it from me for now. Tell me about a feature of masculinity that makes you happy down in the comments. I hope to see you next time. Thanks for watching. If you're still here or you skipped to this part, I hope that it's because you're engaged and not because you want to fight me. This topic by its very nature is really difficult to talk about, and I touched on most of the reasons why in the video proper, but if you're here, you probably want more, so I'll go ahead and explain myself further. There is a certain kind of guy that I'm really trying to reach here, that I am trying to encourage to connect with me in turn, and if you're one of those guys and you've stuck around for this end part, I assume that's a good sign. So, thank you. Thank you for being here. We are in a vicious cycle of male isolation leading to angry men, leading to those men hurting people, leading to those hurt people very understandably wanting nothing to do with men, leading to male isolation. It is very important to stress that I do not think that anyone who has been victimized owes any amount of forgiveness, openness, or emotional labor to anybody else, let alone the people who hurt them. But as someone who has been the victim of male violence more than once, and is also a member of the very demographic that has victimized me, this is a hugely important part of my own healing process and my principles of caring for my community. When people haven't been taught how to understand nuance, it is not productive to punish them for not understanding nuance. When men are hurting for reasons that are unique to them as men, but have not yet developed an understanding of intersectionality, talking about male privilege and patriarchy sounds to many of them, or can sound to many of them, like you're basically saying, you're living life on easy mode and you're still struggling? What a failure you must be. So if you don't like what I've done here or how I've done it, that's allowed. If you have good faith suggestions on how I can do better next time, I would love to hear them. Because right now, I am just doing the best that I can with the tools that I have, and I'm always looking to improve my toolkit. If, however, you are here to talk about how these lonely guys deserve their loneliness and they deserve their pain, I'm going to ask that you don't do that. That's not the energy I want to bring to this conversation. And there are spaces outside of this one where you can go do that. I want other men to feel like they can access empathy here, and I think it's really important that they get that opportunity. Thanks for sticking around for this. Gonna call it for real this time.